Good morning, everyone. This is Robert Hancock with Rico and MarcomCentral. Wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to join us this morning. We've got a pretty interesting presentation for you today. MarcomCentral is works with a number of different industries, but today we really wanted to focus on one of our key industries, which is financial services. There's a lot of challenges within the financial services sector in terms of keeping your marketing compliant and at the same time scalable. So that's going to really be the focal point of today's conversation. We're going to have two different presenters today, actually, joining us. One of them is going to be Rick Oppman. Rick has been with the organization for, it's coming up close to 10 years now, and has represented us in a number of different scenarios and is probably one of the leaders in our financial services practice area. And joining us also is going to be Brian Jackson. Brian is one of our lead sales engineers and consultants here at MarcomCentral, which is part of Rico, and he will be providing you with the live demonstration portion today. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Rick.
All right. Thanks, Robert. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few slides, try not to bore you to death with too many slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and Brian will give you a firsthand look at the platform, and you can see some of the things that you can do with inside of MarcomCentral and how these relate to the financial market. So as I was kind of prepping for this, I found this article that was written by Ad Age that I think really kind of rings true with what we're talking about here today. And I pulled this one little nugget out of here about financial marketers really walking a tightrope, trying to balance innovation with the need to stay compliant in a rapidly evolving media landscape. And those four squares off to the right there are some of the biggies that they're contending with, right? You now have AI-driven environments. Compliance is always at top of mind for everybody in the financial services market. Brand governance and how do we go about doing that, which has changed a lot in the last few years, and all the regulatory demands. And then if you take all of those things going on and then you kind of couple that with the speed and the level of personalization that really needs to happen in today's world, it just sometimes butts heads with the strict oversight requirements that's in the financial services market. And it can really slow things down. So let's just peel that onion back just a little bit. If we look at the landscape in general in this industry, obviously it's very highly regulated. Sometimes I think it gets more and more regulated. Some of the folks on the call can probably attest to that, whether it's the SEC, FINRA, if you're doing work overseas and GDPR comes into play, the dynamics of the market that you're competing in, how fast that has to be. There's this rapid digital transformation and just the expectations of the customers that you're working with, they just expect things to be a certain way and you kind of have to deal with that. And then the high stake part of it, which is sometimes the compliance risks, right? Which can include everything from fines, damage to your reputation because something happens and it gets reported in the news media, and it could potentially be legal action as well. So this is serious stuff that's going on within the financial services industry. If we continue down that road, there's three other things that I kind of draw from this, and one of them is the bottlenecks that can happen just getting content improved. You know, legal and compliance has their hands in about everything that marketers are generating. They kind of have to, but it slows down the go-to-market speed. So you have to be as proactive as you possibly can and get out ahead of things as much as you can because you know that compliance piece exists and how it could slow things down. Inconsistent messaging, right? You have multiple teams, depending on your size, multiple teams and channels that can just completely dilute the brand voice and also confuse it. And then certainly data sensitivity, right? In an industry like this, there are very strict rules around customer data usage, the disclosure of any of that information. You constantly have to contend with that. So if we take a look a little bit at some of the strategies around compliance and consistency, what do? One of the first things that we've kind of realized in the years that we've worked with financial service companies, which is going on 20 years now, it kind of starts with centralizing content. Whether you're using a DAM or some kind of CMS tool, you got to rein it in and make sure all the content is where it should be and you have tabs on it. Trying to get as much pre-approval on templates and disclaimers, right? Getting that kind of stuff done ahead of time, it just speeds up content creation and making sure that compliance is attended to. And just the collaboration across all the different functions in the organization, especially when it comes to marketing and, when they create that content, what is legal's viewpoint on it? What is the compliance team's legal? What is their viewpoint on it? And trying to do as much of that stuff as proactively as you possibly can so that you're not creating or tripping across these bottlenecks all the time. The other piece is just the tools and technologies that are available to us now. There's all kinds of regulation technology solutions out there to automate compliance checks and audit trails in case you ever need them. There's AI powered reviewing tools to flag risky language that sometimes in a lot of cases you never really realize that it was risky. Amazing tools to use in that regard if it's used appropriately, just to ensure alignment with the regulations that are out there. And then certainly the brand governance platforms. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this has changed a lot. Some of those you on the call may have even come, depending on how long you've been in the industry, seen this change exponentially to maintain and help you maintain that visual and verbal brand consistency across all the channels that you're trying to communicate across. So some of the things that I would point to in terms of takeaways, and I kind of touched on this, you have to be as proactive as you possibly can. I mean, that's not always possible, but the less that you react to things, the better off you're going to be. When you can embed that compliance early in that content lifecycle, you avoid a lot of hiccups along the way. And empowering your teams with guardrails, right? And how do you go about doing that? Giving them that kind of creativity in a safe, approved framework. Sometimes that's a heck of a lot easier said than done, depending on your size and how spread out you are and the content and how quickly you have to disseminate it, the messaging that's on it. And then consistency builds trust. I mean, there's no mystery behind that. Any marketer worth a grain of salt knows that unified brand voice will always reinforce the credibility and that customer loyalty that everybody's going after. So I think we started in 2002-ish. So we've been perfecting and building this platform for 20 plus years. But as I mentioned, we've worked a lot with the financial services vertical. And I'll just point to a few things that I think we've really kind of helped them address. And the first one is just bringing it all together, having a place where they can maintain brand and compliance control in a single source of truth, right? So you don't have content laying everywhere. But when you centralize it, it's got to be easy for people to access it in the roles that they are inside the organization. Making that customized content or allowing them to customize that content safely. So having those guardrails in place, using dynamic templates with built-in compliance guardrails so that those outlying locations or field employees can localize that content without any risk, okay? Automating compliance workflows, right? So streamlining approvals, version control, any audit trails to meet regulatory mandates. If they come down and you have to report on certain things, that information has to actually be there. Ensuring brand consistency across everything, right? Enforcing the brand guidelines that you've worked very hard to put in place across all the teams, all the channels, and being able to make universal updates on very critical information, which Brian will talk to you a little bit about that. Some of what we've done in this area, it's actually pretty amazing. Distributing content in a very efficient way, right? Once you spend all this time and effort creating this content, launching it, you got to have a good and effective way of getting it out there so you can quickly share things that are approved assets across departments, regions, employees, different platforms, whatever. And then how do you get insight and gain that insight on content and how it's being utilized? So there's been a lot of work done on content that you create and you push it out to your customers or potential customers, and you get all kinds of data and feedback on that. But there's very little tools out there that tells you about the content that you're creating and how it's consumed by your employees. How are they using it to get to the intended audience? What are they doing with it? How are they customizing it? Are they even doing that? So we've built a lot of insights and analytics into our platform so that you can track asset usage, the performance related to that, and really understand what employees are doing with it, or in a lot of cases, what they're not doing with it. I was in a meeting earlier this week and somebody was talking about an insurance individual selling policies in a Michigan suburb, and they just never used this content, this one particular brochure that marketing had created. So they finally went to the individual, asked him what was going on, and figured out that a majority of his clientele that he was interfacing with were Asian. And all of the content was written in English. And a lot of the people that he dealt with didn't even speak English. So what we try to do with our insights is help you get to the bottom of that very quickly and make changes if you need to so that you can move on. So, all right, I'm going to pause there. I've talked enough about the industry and some of what we've done to kind of address that. I'm going to turn it over to Brian and let Brian share his screen and give you a little peek at MarcomCentral. All right, Brian, all yours.
All right, I am sharing my screen. Is everyone able to see it?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. All right, in line with what Rick was just saying, we have a fictitious financial company here called Jensen Financial. And this user-facing portal is going to kind of give us some insight into several of the topics that Rick was just speaking to, right? So it is obviously branded for your financial institution. However, it can be customized however you wish, and you can maintain that brand while still having different user groups. So for instance, under our fictitious Jensen Financial company, we have loans, we have financing, we have bank, et cetera, et cetera. And these might have slightly different logos, coloring, stuff like that. So the same platform could be different, show different color schemes, different items based on different user permissions. So that's one way that you can kind of maintain that brand consistency so you're not forcing one group through another like color scheme or something like that that they're maybe not familiar with. But no matter what you do, the portal itself is going to be 100% responsive to the screen size of the user, right? So that happens automatically. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and jump into one of the categories here. And you'll notice that we have several brochures and flyers being presented. And then we have on the left a way that we can kind of filter through those. And again, maybe a certain department is familiar with certain things. So they say, well, gosh, we have a new employee, but it's in the banking division, right? So we have filtered through, theoretically hundreds of assets just to land on one based on these advanced search and filtration facets here on the left. Similarly, you can use an Amazon style search to look for something maybe you don't recall offhand, but we know we want to go for a certain co-branded brochure for this, right? And notice here, there we are. Whoops, I accidentally hit enter too fast. Anything that's going to have the word co-branded in it is, whether it's in the text itself or in the name, in the SKU, it's going to come up in my search results. right? So let's go ahead and choose this one. And here is kind of a very good example of a lot of the things that Rick was talking about with those brand guardrails to protect, all the effort that you've put in as a marketing department into developing your brand identity, protecting it, and spreading it, right? So you want people to basically be able to be flexible in what they can create, but not step off the boundaries of what you've set up for the branding. So here, we've obviously got the name, a description, pricing, etc. All this is customizable, and this can even change based on user group permissions. Certain user groups may be able to type in their own, amount, or others just get between 1 and 500, etc. Some may not even see pricing. Some may require a approval before they proceed. It's really up to you. Let's go ahead and customize. And in here, we're going to see that kind of flexibility of design, but also control and protection of the brand kind of come together. So notice here, as I mentioned before, we've got different branches of the Jensen Financial Company, banking, investing, loans, what have you, right? Notice if I choose banking, I have certain pre-approved headlines here in this choice consequence model. Now, these have already been vetted by marketing, they're spelled correctly, they're grammatically correct, etc. So this way, if you wished, we could open this up, and this could just be an open field where somebody could type in their own headline. They could upload a photo like from their dog or their cell phone or something like that. Obviously, you don't want to do that if the goal is to protect the brand. So what we've done is we've implemented this choice consequence model that's going to have certain headlines and certain pre-approved gallery images that they can choose from. Notice if I choose a different wing of the company, like loans, my headline option is different. My gallery options are different. I'm going to go ahead and choose this nice couple here. And then with scalability is one of the other things that we mentioned, right? Notice that I have an address to, city, state, zip, phone, website, etc. here, but I don't have fields here. Now, I certainly could, but I don't want users going through and potentially messing up a phone number or an office location is moved, etc., right? I want to basically be able to lock that down. I have one simple field here, just the branch location. And what that is going to do is that is going to call back to a simple spreadsheet that's going to grab the correct address, city, state, zip, etc. for me, right? And that simple spreadsheet is uploaded to our system and can be attached to as many different templates as you like. The great thing about that is you make a simple change, all your templates are now in compliance. So not only do we see this with locations and so forth, but we see it with disclaimers a lot, legal information, bioinformation, medical information, things like that. You don't have to know any coding. You just have to be able to alter one cell in a spreadsheet and upload it. And within seconds, all of your material is within compliance. And thus, your brand is scalable, right? So here I choose Solana Beach. And I have some other options here. I've got my Jensen branding. Do I want to go ahead and co-brand? Yes. Notice that all these fields appear now. And again, this could change based on user. Maybe certain users you don't even want to see this co-branding option, and others you want to give them access to. It's really up to you. But here I can upload a file, or I can choose from certain approved logos. Like let's go ahead and choose focus and pop in some addresses here, right? And we'll make it San Diego. And we can also include things like notice character count limits, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and choose a phone number with dashes. And I'm going to use a web address with a capital letter in it. But, again, that's not consistent with my brand identity, right? We use dots, we use a certain color, we use lowercase for our web entries. With that in mind, the template has been programmed to know that for these particular fields. And whenever I preview it, it's going to correct that for me. So it's going to go ahead and anticipate, look for, and correct that mistake if it's there. So here we are. We have our loan headline that I chose, our loan photo. Let me go ahead and zoom in. And this works very nice on a mobile device or a tablet as well, by the way. And notice I chose the Solana Beach office. I didn't have to type in any of that stuff. It grabbed it from the spreadsheet. And my co-branding focus, right, that has come in and it has corrected my error, my user error, and converted the dashes to dots and forced a lowercase on the web address. And you can do a lot of little things like that, but that's just showing you a few examples of some of the power of the system to make sure that people don't abuse your branding. That looks good, so let's go ahead and hit done. Oh, sorry, I accidentally clicked in something. I got to preview it again. Now there we go. Okay, let's go ahead and hit done. And we have several options here, right? I can go ahead and share this out via email. I could also share it via social media, right? And it's going to resize to Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter based on what I choose. I could send this out to somebody. I could pick various formats. I could download and control the different formats, including multiple at once, etc. But if you want to go ahead and put an approval process in place here, you may as well. So you may say, hey, for certain users, this button is going to say request download, request share, right? Or they can't check out before somebody has approved it. And we'll touch more on that process later. But again, we want to protect that branding. So we can put steps in there to make sure that more eyes are on it before it's either downloaded or emailed out, shared to Facebook, or sent to a printer to print, 10,000 copies. We're going to go ahead and add to cart here. And notice that we can do things like, for instance, have user budgets. You can have group budgets as well. So you can really do things that can kind of control like minimums and maximums and things like that. So you can kind of open up or restrict that workflow as you see fit. I'm going to proceed to checkout. And here I have a very clean checkout process, right? I won't spend too much time on this because I know the point of this is, again, more like brand control and scalability. But here you can do things like have an address book in place. And so, again, certain users, like say maybe you've got an East Coast group and you don't want them to see LA or Denver or Seattle, so they won't. Others can add an address on the fly. Right here, I can kind of do everything. You can set up various delivery methods, UPS, FedEx, ground, overnight, whatever you want to set up. You can customize various fields here as well. Set up payment methods, invoicing, purchase orders, set up your job tickets, all that fun stuff, cost centers. If everything looks good, I'm going to refresh the order. And I'm going to go ahead and put that into production, right? There we go. Everything looks good there. Let's review and confirm. We've got our confirmation, shipping, delivery, payment, billing, etc. Let's go ahead and complete the order. And now we'll jump back to that approval process, right? So this particular user has gone ahead and created, an order basically from alpha to zeta, right? Alpha to omega, I guess, would be the old Greek. But we've got the order details here. Now, for somebody that doesn't have that full permission, what's going to happen is these order details are going to end up in the requisition history, right? Where someone that has admin approval, like myself in this case, and get a notification that, for instance, Rick is waiting on me to view this order. I can approve it. I can actually go in and edit what he did, or I can deny it. And as I do that, the workflow will be updated. Rick and any other relevant parties will be notified, and the order will be pushed through or denied, etc. Now, with all that said, right, you probably want to see how your users are using the portal and have feedback on that. So here we have a fully fleshed out business intelligence panel here that's going to track everything that all your users are doing within the portal. So that image that we picked for that particular template, you can look that up by the template itself and see how many users are picking that particular image versus another image. And what that's going to do is that you can grab all that data, whittle it down and export it as a PDF or a spreadsheet and kind of make informed decisions about your brand choices going forward. Like, hey, for our loan office, is this headline particularly effective, right? For our banking division, I see the folks in the Solana Beach office and the Texas office are using it, but not the folks in the New York office. Do I need to call them and, see if this is not relevant to them, right? And in addition to all that, you've got your standard typical reporting where you can report by pretty much anything. You can also include other options beyond this. You can whittle it down, set your report to go back several years, save it, run it again later if you wish, and just get a nice simple Excel that's going to show you how orders are flowing through the system. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll kick this back over to our host.
Thanks, Brian. Well, hopefully that gave you guys a little bit of a peek inside of MarcomCentral. There's all kinds of things that we can do with the platform. Just a couple other things I'll touch on here before we get to Q&A if anybody has any questions. We've the portal that Brian showed you, I mean, we literally have built thousands of those for all kinds of environments. There are some very large banking institutions in the US that use MarcomCentral in a what I'll say kind of a dramatic way because of the size and scope. There are also, we scale way down, so there's all kinds of mid-sized financial services organizations, some of them here in the Midwest in Wisconsin and Michigan that use the platform for the very same reasons, but just on a smaller scale. So this is kind of and I always like to use this slide because this kind of cuts to the gist of what MarcomCentral is all about. If you think about the time that Brian took going through this co-branded template that was, let's say, built originally in InDesign using our plugin, the idea is that you should be able to create a template like this one time, and our platform will manage all the possible variables that could hit it. I was literally on a meeting about 45 minutes ago, maybe an hour ago, with an organization out on the East Coast, had about 20 different locations. And the poor marketing person was creating individual content for all 20 locations with the same assets, but she would apply the customization so that it made sense for the Boston location versus the Providence location. And in the context of using MarcomCentral, all of that goes away. It literally can build that template one time, put the guardrails around it, and because of our ability to manage variable data, you build it once and we manage the variables. So that's kind of MarcomCentral in a nutshell. So I'm going to pause there. Then we've got a few minutes left for Q&A. So if I know Robert's kind of been managing the chat, if there's any questions that are inside of there, or I don't know if they can unmute Robert or if those are, I mean, everybody's mics might be turned off, but if there's any questions, we'd be glad to answer them.
Yeah, great question, Rick. And I do actually have everyone's mics and cameras muted for the webinar today. I have been monitoring the chat and the Q&A section. I haven't seen anything come in at this point, so I think we can go ahead and give everybody a few minutes back in their day. We will be sending out a recording of this, and that's 90% of the time where I see the questions come from is after folks have had a chance to review it and share it with some of their colleagues internally that may not have had the opportunity to join us today. So we'll be getting that recording out. It'll probably be early next week when we send that out. But we'd like to thank everybody again for their time today. We hope you found it an informative session. Obviously, there's some areas that MarcomCentral can really add value to the financial services industry in terms of some of the big areas that we address, right? That scalability, that compliance, and that personalization. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and we'll let you get back to it. Have a great rest of the week. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.